Maaria Mozaffar is an attorney and an author. She focuses on legislation and on building cross-cultural relationships that, I don't know, that help us live in a diverse but also in an inclusive society. So we're not all in our own little bubbles. Hi there.
Hello, how are you, Edwin?
Thank you. I am good. Tell us, a little bit about your work and what you're working on now.
Sure. So I have been writing legislations for about 20 years now, and they're legislations that are focused on breaking the echo chamber in a way where they create policies to make more inclusive communities for all of us. And so, really, the legislations are state and federal, and they're designed to be able to have access points for community members to come in and be part of civic life.
Important. And you've also spent a lot of time with cross-cultural conversations. Right now, those are enormously important. How I guess I should ask, how has that changed since we have uh, in the last year?
Well, Edwin, I'll say right now, I think there's two things that are under attack in this country. One is multiculturalism, and second is empathy. And it's actually been targeted as a toxic construct that multiculturalism is anti American and that the intent of the founders was never to have a multicultural society. And so when you analyze the intent behind the executive orders and the policies that come through the way immigration is enforced, and also the additional intention to remove birthright citizenship, what you're actually looking at is to respond to the changing demographic of this country. So either Americans, all of us have to decide that this is a multicultural society and that that is a asset to our humanity, or it's not.
That's really interesting. I mean, your answer was multiculturalism and empathy. And in the rest of this show, with the last three
Mhm,
hours I've been on, we've answered that question differently, but
mhm,
not irreconcilably differently. The
mhm,
answer that we've given is what's under threat right now is the rule of law and
mhm,
civil rights.
mhm.
But right, but
Well,
those are those are the legal
that's tied.
consequences of the things you're talking about.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, they're completely tied, right? Because you can remove the rule of law and the civil rights protections of individuals to send them a message that this society is not multicultural. That's how it's done. So if you make it so uncomfortable for individuals to be here, to walk into hospitals, to go to schools, to walk on the streets, just because they're different, or to go in their places of worship, you're giving them a message that the rule of law is designed to protect individuals that are of a certain group, which is completely un-American. And I think what's interesting is how an administration can balance that intent, right, without crossing the line. And what we recognize is that we have crossed the line when you violate the Constitution or create policies in order to circumvent the Constitution and to discriminate based on national origin or religion or culture or ethnicity. Then you are creating a system where you are actually anti-constitution. And I think that's very interesting to make this argument is for individuals that kind of get, uncomfortable with the word multicultural and say, oh, this is all about diversity, inclusive communities. Actually, no, this is about being either pro-constitution or anti-constitution, whether you understand the intent of the founders or you don't.
You gave your answer and your focus is on our culture and on who we are and not
Mhm,
on I mean, even though you're a lawyer and even though you write legislation, your focus is cultural, and that I think is the base of all of this. So let me ask
mhm,
you, you live in the
mhm,
Chicago area, so like me, you saw and lived through the ICE invasion here, not quite what they
mhm,
had in Minneapolis, but it was still
mhm.
painful. What did you think of the public response to that, to ICE's appearance here?
Well, I think I echo the sentiment that the candidate for Senate Abdul Sayed stated, which is public understood that what was being demonstrated is trying to push the line of using paramilitary force for civil offenses. And that's what ICE was trying to show, right? It's trying to show that, and the public recognize that, which is very interesting. I said this on another show once, that it puts Republicans in a very interesting position because that's what the Second Amendment was designed for. It's when the government takes arms against its own citizens or its own people on the streets. And so ICE was actually in the process of doing that and demonstrated that that's what it wanted to do. And I think the public recognized that. I wish that it was beyond. What we saw was beyond the struggle between individuals that were on the streets and ICE. I wish that the policies that were demanded and requested and are being demanded around the country, which is we can't have individuals that have masks and don't have IDs, was taken seriously. But as you know, the administration's response has been, we don't have money to put cameras on all of these agents, right? And
They
we,
they they have the money, Maria. They don't
of
have
course,
they don't wanna
of
do it,
course,
right?
of
They have I
course.
mean,
So that's the
they spent
response.
$1 billion a day since then, closing the
Of course.
Straits of Hormuz. So they
Of
got
course.
plenty of
Of course. So we know that, right? And I think that connecting the dots there, that the argument that we don't have enough money is actually a code for we want to push the line of protecting our citizens and allowing them to use the Constitution to protect themselves. We want to push that line as far as we can to show that there is the ability for the American government to use paramilitary force against civil offenses. And that's a very dangerous path. It's un American. And I think that's what Illinois recognized, and we need to continue to frame it in those terms.
So what would you ask people to do if people are tired and they're afraid? Um, this was an awful week. Just was an
Yeah.
awful week, right? And 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 people are worried that we will not successfully restore the rule of law, civil rights, the ability to be a diverse and interesting community, as
Right.
opposed to being a bland, all white Christian nationalist community,
Mhm. Mhm.
which most people don't want, but they're afraid right now.
Mhm.
What's your counsel?
Well, the council is back to the statement that you reaffirmed earlier, is that this is a question of who we are culturally. Right? I think I hate to uh, sound lofty here, but it is the soul of the nation that's at risk. And so, my job as a policymaker writing legislations is to take a step back, step outside of the fear, and say, what can we create and do? And what kind of innovative way can we put policy forth that actually chips away at the policies that divide us? And so, my response to the public would be, let's be smarter. Let's talk about what strategically we can do. I'll give you an example. For example, there was a Religious Liberties Commission that the administration had that had organized, if you remember. And the Religious Liberties Commission, we had somebody that was kicked off. That was Catholic. We had a Muslim that resigned, and then we had a group of the Hindu community that actually filed a lawsuit for not being included in the commission. So either we can say, well, the religious liberties of these groups don't matter, or we can create innovative way to have our own town hall for religious liberties policy priorities and bring communities together. These are innovative, proactive initiatives that we have to do when no one's driving the bus on these issues, right? And so I would say be very hopeful and innovative and get on the side of what can we create policy wise to counter these issues versus playing defense. We need to play offense.
Um, Yeah, I mean, much of what I think we have to do at the moment is less about policy because we don't control the ability to make it right now. They're blocking it everywhere. It's about people. And
Hmm.
I think the more that we do to engage outside of our own communities right now, the more we build multicultural alliances and friendships, even, and understandings, the stronger we're going to be as they keep, as long as they have power and on the attack. But oh,
Yeah.
when they lose power, Maria, there are things that we can do to
Oh, the
both
things
hold
we
them
can do.
accountable and to move the country into a better place.
Right. Absolutely. And I would say, even if the policy is not moving forward, like you said, they're trying to block everything. The process and conversation of having those discussion, having those hearings, right? Having
Yeah, yeah.
those testimonies heard,
Yeah.
even if they don't pass out of committee, you're
Yep.
setting a precedent of empowering people to be truth tellers, right? To move forth and push back. And so that is a muscle that we're going to have to flex for when things do change, where we actually do have to cross the finish line. So I think that that is a process of policy making. It's not getting to the finish line tomorrow. It's a process of building that. But 100% I agree with you that that parallel process of building relationships with communities, getting to know each other. There's one thing that's very critical is raising global citizens. If you want to raise global citizens, you have to inspire a younger generation to care enough about different individuals around the world. And to be able to do that, you have to model that. And it
Mhm.
could be as basic as trying a different cuisine and going into a different neighborhood and striking a conversation that seems like you would have never had one, other than the opportunity that you're creating for yourself. And that starts very basic. That starts at the dinner table at home. That starts at work. College campuses are great for that reason. And I wish that we would have this environment right now where we have college students feel safe in different communities that can have these conversations without feeling threatened, right? Sharing their truth and moving forward, because these are the places where we will have cultural competency that organically grows into something that's permanent.
Uh, so let me unpack a little bit. First, I agree and I stand corrected. And I'm reminded that Sean Casten,
Mhm,
a congressman said to me, you know what, it takes multiple cycles to pass a bill.
mhm,
And we need to get started now on all of this stuff. And so you're absolutely right on the
yeah,
legislative side. And
yeah,
I want to ask you about college campuses. Do
yeah.
you think that right now those conversations are not, that kids are not able to have those conversations? As colleges are, they still sort of everybody in their own corner.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that. We started with the congressional hearings that we saw after October 7th, the
Yeah.
congressional hearings where the university presidents were brought in and they were questioned. And I think what you saw across college campuses are students being divided based on the policy initiatives that the administration at that time wanted to see and felt needed to be responsive for. And so building relationship, look, calling in a university president and setting the precedent of what is appropriate for academic discourse is not going to change how college students feel about each other, right? They're not
That's
going to
right.
learn from each other. So we have to be able to create environments where students feel safe. If their diplomas are being revoked based on the truth that they are experiencing, then we need to go a little bit deeper to have those conversations. And I've seen this across the board around the country. And I will say, there's so many Jewish students around the country who are feeling this tug here, especially with anti-Semitism and the Stop Anti-Semitism campaign. I know that for a fact, that they're feeling this tug here where they want to be in a space where they can have a conversation and not feel like they represent an idea or a policy agenda item that they are not putting forth themselves. And the Muslim college students or students that are pro-Palestinian on this specific issue, because this is a specific issue on college campuses for us to discuss, they are feeling the same pull. They don't want to be silenced, but they want to continue their relationship to speak openly with Jewish students. And so that is a perfect example for us to see that the academic freedom of discourse has to be protected at all costs. And when we don't see that happening, we're building a precedent to say, even though college campuses are the last place where individuals will have classmates sitting next to each other that are not like them, right? They're designed to have you interact with people that are not like you. If that place we are pulling apart for political agendas, we're creating a generation of individuals that don't know how to talk to each other. And that's extremely dangerous for our policies that we want to push forth.
Yeah, I'm more optimistic than you. I think schools originally were overwhelmed a year ago, a couple years ago,
Mhm,
and
mhm,
have caught up a little bit in an attempt to find safe space for students to talk to each other. Um, and I think students recognized that the way both that the way that particular conflict between Israel and Hamas in Gaza was unfolding is so tragic that the
mhm,
that the standards of protest on both sides did not rise to the moral moment.
Mhm,
It
mhm.
was a different kind of conversation that had to
Different kind of
happen.
conversation.
And
Yeah.
and I think and again, kids are pretty smart. When they were banging their head against a rock for a while, I think they
Mhm.
figured out maybe we need to do something different.
Yeah. No, I do agree. There were moments where I think universities have also understood that students are asking to be part of the process, right?
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
think that's critical.
Yeah. And that is, um, I don't think the world's most intractable issue, but it is the one that resonates here. I mean, that's the one that taught a young generation of Americans what war is, and that because
Hmm.
they didn't know it,
Right.
and that's despite the fact that the United States has been at war all their lives, um, and and uh, and there are bigger, more horrid tragedies in the Sudan and other places.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's the one that taught a generation how miserable war is.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm glad we learned because we'll always make that mistake, as particularly when you have an administration that doesn't know the difference between a strategy and a target list.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I agree with that description. And I think social media changed the game completely,
We'll talk
right?
about that. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, social media puts war at the front seat. It made it viewable, right? It made
yeah.
it something that you can experience. And I will say that,
Do you think I'm sorry to interrupt. Do you think it
yeah,
also made it a bit of a game? And so
in
that,
what sense?
it made it kind of a game so people didn't take it completely seriously?
It depends on what you watch and how it impacted you.
Yeah, yeah,
That's what you know what I mean?
yeah.
So I feel like some things you cannot unsee. And so I think there are individuals that really for the first time saw things that they were not able to swallow
Mm,
and really absorb. And I
mhm,
think that that's a necessary witness that we had. Look, I mean, I was recently 2 years, well, a year and a half ago, I was in Bosnia. And I went to the museum where they, shared the story of how everything happened in Bosnia. And there were so many things that I was not able to witness, just read about until I went to that museum. So
mhm.
this social media aspect of this whole conflict has changed completely for people. It has
Yeah, it's
woken up
interesting.
humanity in a different way, and it has forced different types of narratives to be spoken about, right? That we didn't hear about. And I think what we cannot do is pretend that people didn't see certain things. We can't do that. We can't do that. And I think that it also was a unifier of humanity, because you saw a lot of people who don't see eye to eye on some things, but understood the pain that they saw watching these things. And so the question is, when we're talking about war and we're talking about decisions about military offensive campaigns or defensive campaigns, should the visibility of watching the destruction of humanity in the actual cost of war, should that play a role in our decisions? That's, I think, a decision we have to make, right? And the
I vote
argument,
yes. I vote
yes,
absolutely
I
yes.
vote yes too.
Like, do not hide the horror from people.
Yeah, I vote yes
Yeah,
too. It is very hard to say that, but I vote yes because you actually get to experience what the depths of this pain
yeah,
is.
yeah.
And not only that, when what that does to a community when they experience that pain, what could it invoke?
Mhm.
Right? I mean, this is game theory too. This is strategic thinking as well. What could it invoke in a generation of youth?
Well,
Um,
so we have like a minute left, and
yeah.
I want to just in that minute, the work that you do is affirming. You take these pain points and you figure out how
Mhm.
people get together and move past them, or at least find other things of value in the relationships.
Yeah.
So can you give people some counsel on how to do that in their lives?
I think I would say get out of your own way. Get out of your own way and be very open to what humanity is showing you. Because I think the political rhetoric has helped. And I think it is harmful and blinding. And don't make it so complicated. You know?
All right, if
Don't make it
somebody
so
wants to find
complicated.
your work, how do they do it?
So you can go to my Instagram or you can go to my website. That's the best way. That's my full name.com, MAARIAMOZAFFAR.com. Hopefully you can find it somewhere on your show's website, but that's the best way.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Edwin.